All right, should we give it a go?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. I want to give you a warm welcome for coming to our very first insider look with your friendly executive director from the Benedict Center. This is an idea that came
Jean, you're on mute.
Don't know how that happened.
Sure enough. Well, you missed that great intro. It was hilarious. No, I'll just move on. So sorry. I just wanted to say thank you for coming and being part of what is our first insider look with the Benedict Center and what might become a tradition of something we do more frequently if that is something that we all find to be useful and helpful. I did put together a bit of a PowerPoint just mostly to keep me on point because I could talk for forever about the Benedict Center, but I want to make sure we're leaving room for questions and answers. Are we ready to go? Everyone can hear me? Thank you. All right. So for those of you who did register, you may have noticed that you were asked to vote on the subject that you wanted to hear about. And so I wanted to share with you the results of that voting, if you will. And in a way, it gives a bit of an overview of all of the programs or services that the Benedict Center offers. And I just want to let people know if we're going to be going with the winner, Systems Change Advocacy, but I am very happy to, if not do another one of these presentations around a different subject, feel free to invite me to your church or your organization, or just even give me a call, and happy to have a conversation with you about any of these items. But you can see that in addition to the Systems Change Advocacy, we do have reentry services for women impacted by the justice system. And that happens at the Women's Reentry Program, which is at the CRC. Some of you might ask, what is the CRC? That is the new name for the House of Correction in Franklin. It stands for Community Reintegration Center. So we have a program down there inside that facility, and then our Women's Harm Reduction Program here at our main location on MLK, which is a licensed outpatient clinic. And which is really what I just mentioned there with the outpatient treatment here at MLK. How are we reentry here at MLK for the Women's Harm Reduction Program? It's because we have a contract with the Department of Corrections, and we work with women who are under community supervision, basically on probation or parole. And so we're providing treatment services and support so that they can be successful in their reentry. Peer specialists, that's what's new. Our last newsletter to folks spoke about that. It's part of our new program called the Bridge program. And the peer specialists are really working with women everywhere in our agency. Then we have our street outreach and our drop-in centers, which are part of the Sisters program. That is our program reaching out directly to women in the street-based sex trade. It's made possible by some faith collaboratives that support North and South, and we're located in the 2 Milwaukee police districts where there's the highest level of street-based sex trade activity as measured by prostitution arrests with the police department. So it's just a snapshot of areas and programs and where those are located, because I think sometimes it's hard to visualize where all these things are. So there you have it. Before we go into systems advocacy, though, I just want to give a little bit of what's new at the Benedict Center. And so just a few highlights. One is that we've really been increasing our harm reduction services. For those of you who are following what is happening with the opioid and fentanyl overdoses, which is really at epidemic levels in our community, you may have heard that harm reduction like Narcan is very critical for saving people's lives, preventing those overdoses from turning into fatalities and helping people live to see another day. We're now able to provide Narcan training to women while they're still incarcerated at the CRC, and then provide them Narcan in their property when they're released. A very high risk time for women to overdose is when they are first being released from jail because they've been forced into sobriety, and they and so their tolerance isn't the same, and so they might go back to using at that same level in overdose. But also right now there's fentanyl, there's this horse tranquilizer in drugs, and so you really just don't know what you're getting. So all around, Narcan is a really critical way to help save lives. We have lost too many to overdoses right within that first week or so of being released from jail. The other pieces are our new peer support specialists. And I want to thank Impact 100. If there's any members out there listening, this is a project that they're helping us really initiate. And if you want to hear more about peer support specialists, we're not going to cover it as much today, but I understand that the Friends of the Benedict Center, we're having a luncheon in June, are going to be featuring our 2 new peer support specialists as the main speakers. So there'll be information on our website about that. I believe the date is June 14th, and it's a luncheon, and it's a great opportunity to come and learn more about the Benedict Center. Our employment training, we're really excited to see our employment training return after COVID, but also expand. And pictured here is Julia May, who's our bridge coordinator and main employment training teacher. I want to give a shout out to Spectrum, who might be listening, because Spectrum helped supply these Chromebooks that you see in the picture. And an added bonus is that when women complete all of the sessions for our employment program, they get to keep the Chromebook that they've been working on, which is an incredible incentive for women. They're very excited about it. It's helping bridge that digital divide, but also it's very key to being able to apply for jobs, checking your email, and being part of that professional working world. And last but not least, and we'll be talking about this more, we've been able to increase housing for women who are fleeing violence from domestic violence or sex trafficking. And this is part of our Sisters program, our Bridge program, and our community justice. I think you'll see how they all weave together. So, community justice. We have the Benedict Center. For those of you who have been following us over our almost 50-year history, know that in addition to providing direct services for women impacted by the justice system, we've also positioned ourselves to be a voice for the women and to advocate for changes within the system, and in fact, even in other systems, not just the housing, the criminal justice system, but even things like the housing system, in order to help women across the board, and really in many ways help more women than we ever could if we only did our direct services. And so these are some of the areas that we're focusing on. We take a health equity approach. So instead of criminalizing drug use and mental illness and trauma and poverty and victimization and exploitation, we're seeking to provide the kinds of services and supports that women need so that they can actually live a safer and healthier life. We have been working on a pre-arrest diversion with the Milwaukee Police Department for women in the street-based sex trade. That's been a project you may have heard about in the past. You can imagine partnering and getting MPD to change how it does things is not something that happens quickly overnight. So we've had some stops and some starts, but we're in a really good place now. I'll update you about that. And then finally, advocating for increased access to housing as well as treatment for women. This is one of our participants who registered to vote, which is also a form of empowerment, right? So I want to talk about housing, and really housing is so related to safety. When you have safe housing, you are just so much safer than if you are having to trade sex in order to stay somewhere, or if you're in an abandoned house or something known as a drug house, or if you're literally sleeping outside, you can imagine you are not safe. We are working with an academic partner at Marquette University, and she's been working to interview and both with focus groups and one-on-one interviews, women in our sisters program to better understand the issues that they're facing, especially health issues. This is Dr. Jessica Zimlek in the nursing program. And we're going to be doing a more formal presentation of all of her research in the near future, but just wanted to pick a couple of numbers to give a sense of what the issues are that women are facing. So the N here is 52, so 52 women, and of them, 79% of reported being homeless in the last year. 85% reported being trafficked as an adult, and 69% reported experiencing physical violence in the past year. So you can see that women in the street-based sex trade are experiencing homelessness at a very high rate, and they're also experiencing exploitation and violence at a very high rate. So we are continuing to work on shifting that narrative that women in the street-based sex trade are a problem, and better understanding that they are people who have some very serious problems. And if we want to help them and improve the neighborhoods that are impacted, we really need to get at the root causes and find permanent solutions for women. So what I'm going to do is take you a bit through our model of systems change, if you will. I looked at who had RSVP'd, and I saw that this was a really smart group. So I decided it would be all right to get a little bit more technical with you all. And we also have an opportunity for Q&A afterwards if you need anything else broken down further. So there's many ways to approach systems change work, and so this is the way that the Benedict Center has been doing it in the last 10 years. There's other examples: direct action, lobbying. Would be two other examples. What we're doing and focusing on is how do we increase awareness and shift attitudes about some of the key issues facing women. Another way to look at or define systems change is when institutions work differently together in order to benefit or create a changed result for a population. Policies and practice change can happen within institutions without necessarily relying on law changes. And so that is not lobbying when we work with the heads of more local institutions to implement changes in policies and practices. Leadership development is a really core part of our systems change work, and really should be for anyone that people who are most impacted by the issues need to be informing and leading that work. And then, of course, doing the evaluation and dissemination of what we've learned, because just like anything, if we don't evaluate it, we don't really know if our efforts have made a difference. And we want to be able to share that for larger impact. Up on top, you'll see a heading: Housing First equals safety. Are people largely aware of what housing first means? Thinking that most of us do. We can, if not, we can catch that up in the Q&A. So, but so I'm getting technical with our model, but I also want to weave in some stories. And in 2011 is when I started here at the Benedict Center, and it was just maybe about a year or so in that I was at our Sisters North drop-in center and met a woman I'll call Nora, who initially, when I met her, she had stopped using. She'd been through residential treatment at the Maida House. She had stopped trading sex, but then a very violent sexual assault she experienced, was victimized by. And not only that very traumatic experience, but the complete failure of our justice system to find her assailant guilty because of what her background was, just caused her to lose all hope. And so she relapsed and she was back to sleeping outside. One day we were closing up our drop-in center, which closed at 4:30 because we don't have the resources for it to be 24/7. And we had worked earlier on trying to find her some place to go, a shelter, and all of them were full. And so she asked, "Where am I supposed to sleep, Jean?" She knew that we had worked really hard to try and find a solution, but with the shelters full, and she said, I sleep in the park and they tell me to move on. I sleep on the sidewalk or in a doorstop. They tell me to move on. Where am I supposed to go? And this was a dilemma that hit me hard. And I think it's something that really is probably one of the toughest things for our frontline staff to go through, is that we connect with women want and are ready to move forward, but the resources just aren't there. And we're powerless, or at least in that moment, it feels that we're powerless. What can we do? At that time, we had started a sisters leadership circle, and we were really focusing and working with the women to invite them to see how their experiences are part of a larger picture, where systems and conditions are at the root of the issues that they're facing, and how change can happen not just on an individual level, which is what their treatment is usually very much focused on, but how could we affect change on a neighborhood level, on a city level, on a state level, on a national level. So, we're balancing individual change and responsibility with also what is that bigger set of responsibility that we have as a community, as a society. And the issue that we were working on then and still now was on a pre-arrest diversion, which was something that initially landed in our laps. This wasn't something that women said they wanted. It was the police and the DA's office that called us and said, "Hey, would you all be willing to work with women in lieu of them getting a ticket?" And because we're advocates, we said, "Really? Yes, please." And that's really how that started. And so in some ways, we're trying to get caught up to where the women were at, to make sure that they were influencing how we were shaping that program. And what really just kind of came up again and again within that process over 2 years was feedback from the women that the pre-arrest diversion was nice. They were willing to help us with that, but they just insisted that what they really needed was housing. It was that day-to-day survival that mattered. So we said, "Okay, we're hearing you. We need to make a pivot." So we were able to write a grant to the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin project, and it's really a health equity project that we were able to do. We had a strategic partnership with Impact 211 and the Continuum of Care. I think most people know that Impact 211 is generally the one-stop shop you call when you need any kind of social services. The Continuum of Care is basically our local HUD-funded housing system. HUD requires all communities that get funding to have a continuum of care. And so it's made up of government and private nonprofits to address the issues facing unhoused people. And the way HUD requires it now is that there has to be this central coordinated point of entry for everyone who would want the HUD funding, so that they can do assessments and prioritize and make sure that people with the greatest need are getting the housing resources that they need. So this is where our housing advocacy work gets maybe a little less glamorous and a lot more technical, because in order to understand how we were going to increase access to housing for women, we had to figure out how the housing system worked and why they weren't connecting with the resources that were there. But first and foremost, and I think our biggest impact perhaps from that project, was increasing awareness amongst housing providers as well as the residents in the neighborhoods that are impacted, that when they see women in the street-based sex trade, and they might be thinking, "Oh, that's a sex trade issue or a drug issue or a crime issue," it's also a homelessness issue. I don't think that people generally, when we picture who might be homeless, we think about encampments. We might think about people sleeping in doorways downtown or under bridges, and not realizing that the great majority of women in the street-based sex trade do not have safe and stable housing, if they have any at all. We managed to find a systemic change way of increasing women's access to coordinated entry. So in other words, women aren't going to ever get the services, the housing services that they need, if they don't somehow connect through coordinated entry or 211 and take a housing assessment and basically get in line for the services that they need. And women that we were working with simply were not calling 211, waiting and going through that step. A lot of people felt pretty discouraged by that system not necessarily leading to housing. And I don't blame them. In fact, one of our challenges in the project was keeping staff and women in our program going on the idea of why should we do this housing assessment if it's not going to lead to housing. So we had to really wrestle with that, but we knew that without that data, we're never going to be able to leverage more resources, but also it enabled some women initially to get some of the resources. When we wrote our project to the medical college, we said, we're going to change the prioritization for women in the street-based sex trade who are homeless, to make sure that they're prioritized for the limited housing resources that are out there. And I wouldn't say that we exactly succeeded there, partly because we didn't understand how prioritization worked with HUD resources. So I think one of our greatest takeaways there was the learning of what the problem was really from our standpoint for prioritization. And so again, super technical, but if you're in this field, and a lot of you are, there are categories, because of course the government creates categories for what kind of homeless are you. And category 1 is those that are literally homeless or chronically homeless. So in my layman's terms, that means you're sleeping outside. You're not in a habitable structure where there's utilities, or that it's fit for human living. Maybe you're in a garage, maybe you're in a car, or maybe you're in an encampment, or literally on the street, or sleeping in a bus stop, that kind of thing. What we learned was a lot of the women that we work with didn't necessarily qualify for being literally homeless if they were staying with someone else. And women, because we're very relationship and relational, we tend to find ways to double up, to be on someone's couch, if you will. And unfortunately, as a means of survival, many women we work with, not just in the Sisters program, but across the board, find themselves in situations where they have to trade sex in order to have a place to sleep, which we think is terribly wrong. No one should have to make that choice for housing. I don't even know if you could call it a choice. So, but if women didn't report and couldn't demonstrate that they had been literally homeless for any length of time, they weren't necessarily going to be prioritized for the HUD funding. And what we learned was HUD was prioritizing category 1 homelessness. And so there weren't a lot of resources for other kinds of homelessness. And there were no dollars, HUD dollars. There were no HUD dollars specifically for category 4, which is where a lot of women we work with qualify. Category 4 is basically you're homeless because you're fleeing violence, and that's traditionally or classically defined as domestic violence, but HUD has recently recognized that sex trafficking is another form of violence that women might be fleeing, and therefore that would also count for category 4. So we're like, great, now we know what category a lot of the women we work with would fit in, but there were no dollars attached to that kind of homelessness at that point. And then that project ended. But it led to our next project. And so, and this is still going on. It's a cross-sector collaboration called Empower. And it was started with a grant from U.S. Department of Justice to develop a pre-arrest diversion strategy with Milwaukee Police Department, and to provide women with harm reduction and housing first resources instead of criminalization. This grant was really under BJA's work to address the opioid crisis. The idea is that so many of the women we're working with are using opioids and other drugs. And so how do we create alternatives to criminalization for them? So our steering committee partners, you can see, are both housing division and law enforcement. We had the medical college for evaluation. Southside Organizing Center was an early partner to help us with the neighborhood engagement. And of course, the Benedict Center, which I forgot to put on this list. Now, there are many other stakeholders that are attending regular meetings, but this has been the core group. With this grant, we were able to fund for 3 years a dedicated housing navigator with the county. And as a result of knowing where housing resources are, and not just HUD funded resources, but tax levy funded housing. In other words, Milwaukee County has a tax levy to help fund some of its housing initiatives. And oftentimes that was the kind of housing that we could get women into because of HUD's restrictions. So 85 women over 3 years got housed, which was more than we had ever been able to get housed before. More recently, last year, we were able to sign a memorandum of understanding with Milwaukee Police Department to establish the pre-arrest diversion policy. So that's exciting, that level of commitment from MPD. We're just awaiting for approval on the protocol, and then we'll be rolling that out probably this summer. This also led to us being able to leverage what is called HUD DV bonus funds, which is a horrible name, but the bottom line is it springs us into our next funded project. If you're interested in hearing more, because there's a lot more to the Empower project, it's an open stakeholder meeting, and Connie Konstelak is going to be giving a preliminary evaluation of our project or those results. So if you're interested, put something in the message or send us an email, and we'll make sure that you're invited to that next stakeholder meeting. So this HUD DV bonus funding. So one of the things we're able to leverage as part of our project was finding funding and a funding opportunity to actually expand the amount of housing that's available for women in category 4. So as a result, we formed this collaboration and we applied, Milwaukee County Housing Division being the lead applicant. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Milwaukee County Housing Division because they are an incredible partner. They get it. They've been leading on housing first, which is really harm reduction for housing. And they've been really open to partnerships like this. So they were the lead applicant. And then in addition to ourselves, we tapped Exploit No More, Sojourner Family Peace Center, and Community Advocates. Sojo and Community Advocates are our 2 primary DV shelters in Milwaukee. So it's just under $1 million really of funding for the first 2 years. And it will fund 45 households to receive rapid rehousing vouchers. Those are vouchers that will pay the rent for up to 2 years for people. And it's scattered site. It's not restricted to say housing authority kind of housing. It's any private landlord who's willing to take that tenant and that voucher is where people can live. So they have that empowerment to choose where they want to live, really. It also funds some transitional housing with Exploit No More and in the DV shelters. Exploit No More is a key partnership we've been working together on to ensure that there's transitional housing specifically for women who are fleeing or moving out of sex trafficking situations. First of its kind, now 45 households in a 2-year period will have housing But what's really key here from a system standpoint is that this isn't a grant to the Benedict Center. This is a grant to Milwaukee County COC, and it's being navigated by the Housing Division. So that's a government entity. So these things really speak to the sustainability, but also it's open to everyone in Milwaukee County. You don't have to just be a participant for the Benedict Center to be able to apply for or qualify for these resources. Anyone calling 211 who fits these priorities can access these services. The other piece that's really critical is that, as I understand it, once we get a grant like this from HUD, as long as we do well on it, and we are, we should be able to renew it and potentially even expand it if we demonstrate that the need is there. So this is, to me, our toe in the door, and looking forward to expanding it to being, to getting it really up to scale for the number of women that are out there. Yikes, is it 12:30 already? No one waved at me. Okay, I'm so sorry. So we have some impact and a success story, and I'm just gonna go to the end and stop sharing because I am terrible at time and want to give those who have the ability to stay on a bit longer. I'm very happy to stay on a bit longer, an opportunity to ask questions, and you can do that by raising your hand or putting something in the chat.
Hello.
Hello, hi Tiffany.
Hi, Jean. I just was so excited that the Benedict Center was taking a closer look within. I just want to thank you and your staff for all the great work you do. And, you know, it's okay to go up to the clock because it shows how passionate you are about what you do. And thanks for sharing some great information.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you so much for that. I want to recognize Peggy West Schrader is in the room. And Peggy, I just want to tap you to one of the things I was hoping to include or talk about in terms of systems change for women impacted by the justice system was the free organization. And I wondered if I could just tap you for a second to let people know about that too.
Sure. I also want to give a shout out to Ray Mendoza, who's on our staff and was here today too. We love the work the Benedict Center does, and we're fully supportive. So free is the first of its kind for us, by us, justice impacted women's organization. And we do advocacy and education. We're also a C4, although we're brand new, so we don't get funded to do that yet. So we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes, and Jean always helps. We're so grateful for that partnership. But we're really working on what Jean was talking about with as far as grassroots systemic change. So our organization, we train justice impacted women to be able to make the change that they want to see in the world. And so right now we're working a lot on dignity, issues of dignity. One of them is we would like to make 2023 the year we outlaw shackling of pregnant women, incarcerated women and girls in the state of Wisconsin. Why we still do that, I don't know. And then we also would like to start a Wisconsin prison doula program so that women who are giving birth while they're incarcerated aren't doing that alone. They're being supported. What Ray does in Milwaukee County is he does circles of support. And that's something that we'll be meeting with the Benedict Center about. We believe that through circles of support, we can really help lower women's recidivism. And by giving them the proper supports when they get out, the Benedict Center is doing some wonderful work in this area, and we want to be able to build on that. Circles of support provide mental health. We also provide resources. And then we have a component where we say, hey, if you'd like to do a little bit more, join us for our chapter meetings, and then let's go to the Capitol, let's go to the county board, let's go to the Common Council, and let's talk about what change is needed. Jean just joined us. We did a event on International Women's Day, we went to the Capitol and we did an event called Her Story, in which we literally just took groups of justice impacted women. Jean obviously was there, Ray was there. We went and visited legislators and shared with them the things that we see every single day. Because one of the things our legislators are really honest about is that they don't have lived experience across the board in every area. And so they really rely on us to be able to provide them with what's actually going on within the systems that they help create. And so that's really what Free is about and what we're doing. We just became a C3 again with Jean's help. And we're looking really forward to getting to do more work with the Benedict Center.
Thank you so much, Peggy. So I wanted to highlight that because Free is a different model of how to do community change. It's really more about grassroots organizing. It's statewide, and they're looking at statewide policies. And one of the ways that we're going to affect the kind of change we need is continued strategic partnerships and collaborations. So Benedict Center can't do it by itself. And so we are looking for creative ways that we can connect with other organizations and support those efforts as well. And I think that everyone can get behind the idea that if you're pregnant while you're incarcerated, you don't need to be shackled while you're giving birth. And so that's one of their key issues. Anyone else have a question, comment, thought? And it could be about one of the other areas that we didn't present on as well. So if you have a question about reentry or something else along those lines, happy to address it. It's pretty quiet, and I want to honor people's time because it's almost 12:40. And so I want to thank you for your grace in giving us an extra 8 minutes to have a little bit more of a conversation. Again, if you'd like us to come and give a presentation to an organization that you have to talk about any of the issues or areas of service that the Benedict Center provides, we're more than happy to make that happen. We're looking at doing another insider look sometime in the fall. And if you're here, it means you've registered. We have your contact information and we'll be keeping you in touch. Cindy, is there anything else we need to cover?
I don't think so. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Remember to visit our website and follow us on social media to stay up to date with us. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You want to stay on, Cindy, for a sec?